I always thought my life with Clara was a quiet masterpiece, painted in soft hues of routine and trust. We'd been married 12 years, living in a modest house on the edge of town, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind. I'm Daniel, a man of simple pleasures. Coffee in the morning, a good book at night, and Clara's laughter filling the spaces between. She was a florist, her hands always dusted with pollen. Her smile a bloom I thought belonged only to me. Our days were predictable, but I liked that. Predictability felt like love. It started with the phone calls. Late at night, when the house creaked under the weight of silence, I'd hear her voice drifting from the kitchen. Soft, secretive, a tone I didn't recognize. "Just a client," she'd say when I asked, her eyes darting to the floor. I believed her because I wanted to. But then came the trips, weekends away to flower conventions in cities I'd never heard her mention before. She'd return with bouquets of excuses, her suitcase heavier than it should have been, her scent tinged with something unfamiliar. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why the air felt thicker. One evening I found the first clue. She'd left her laptop open on the dining table, a rare slip for someone so meticulous. I wasn't snooping. Not yet. Just reaching for a glass of water when the screen caught my eye. An email half-read, from someone named T. No subject line, just a string of words that hit me like a punch. "Last night was unforgettable. The way you moved, the taste of you. I can't stop thinking about it." My stomach twisted. I read it again, then again, each word carving a jagged line through my chest. Clara walked in, saw me, and froze. "It's nothing," she said, too quickly, slamming the laptop shut. But her face, pale, wide-eyed, told me it was everything. I didn't confront her that night. Couldn't. My mind was a storm, and I needed calm to navigate it. Instead, I watched her. She moved through our home like nothing had changed, humming as she arranged lilies in a vase, kissing my cheek before bed. But I saw the cracks. Her phone never left her hand now, her laughter sounded rehearsed. I started paying attention to the details I'd ignored. The way she'd linger in the shower, the faint scent of cologne on her scarf, the way she'd flinch when I touched her unexpectedly. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a performance, and I'd been the oblivious audience. Days turned into weeks, and I became a detective in my own life. I checked her phone when she slept, found messages deleted but not erased from the cloud. T was real, persistent, intimate in ways that made my skin crawl. They met at hotels, in cars, in places I'd never imagined Clara stepping foot. I found receipts, dinners I hadn't eaten, rooms I hadn't slept in. Each discovery was a brick, building a wall between the man I'd been and the one I was becoming. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I planned. The truth about T came slowly, like a fog lifting to reveal a jagged cliff. His name was Theo, a photographer Clara had met at one of her conventions. I found his profile online, tall, lean, with a smirk that screamed arrogance. His portfolio was full of her. Clara in fields of wildflowers, Clara laughing against a sunset, Clara in poses I'd never seen her strike for me. The photos weren't just art. They were a story, one I hadn't been invited to read. I sat there, scrolling through his work, my coffee growing cold, my hands trembling with something I couldn't name. I started following her. It wasn't hard. She'd grown careless, or maybe she thought I was too broken to notice. One Saturday, she said she was meeting a supplier. I trailed her in my truck, keeping my distance, watching as she pulled into a diner 2 towns over. Theo was there, waiting in a booth by the window. She slid in beside him, not across, her hand resting on his thigh like it belonged there. They didn't kiss. Not then. But the way she leaned into him, the way he brushed her hair back, was worse. It was familiar. It was ours, stolen and repurposed. I didn't storm in. I sat in the parking lot, engine off, watching through the glass. They ate, laughed, shared a slice of pie like some twisted parody of a date night. My mind raced. How long had this been happening? Months? Years? The email had said last night, but the photos stretched back at least a year. I thought of every time she'd come home late, every excuse I'd swallowed. The pie was the breaking point. We'd had a tradition, Clara and I. Pie on Fridays, just the two of us. Seeing her share it with him felt like she'd taken a knife to our history. That night, I dug deeper. I hacked into her email. Her password was still our anniversary, a cruel irony, and found a treasure trove of their affair. Messages about meeting in secret, about moments they'd stolen between her life with me. But it wasn't just the meetings that gutted me. It was the details, the way she described me to him. "Daniel's so predictable," she wrote once. "He'd never suspect a thing." Another, "He's a good man, but he doesn't see me." I stared at those words until they blurred, my reflection in the screen a stranger's face. She turned me into a caricature, a prop in her double life. I could have confronted her then, demanded answers, thrown her out. But that wasn't enough. She'd taken my trust, my home, my pie nights, and given them to Theo like they were hers to give. I wanted her to feel what I felt. Not just the pain, but the slow, suffocating realization of losing everything. So I kept quiet, let her think I was still the fool she'd painted me as. I started sketching a plan, one that would unravel her world thread by thread, leaving her with nothing but the wreckage she'd built. The betrayal wasn't standard, and that's what made it unbearable. It wasn't hidden motel rooms or late-night whispers that defined it. It was the absurdity, the audacity of how she'd woven Theo into our life. One night, I found a Polaroid tucked in her coat pocket. It was her, naked but for a garland of daisies, lying on a blanket in some forest clearing. Theo's signature scrawled on the back, "My muse, forever." She'd brought that coat home, hung it in our closet, worn it to dinner with me, all while carrying his claim on her skin. It wasn't just infidelity, it was a taunt. I started noticing the props. A necklace she wore, a thin chain with a tiny camera charm, his gift, I learned from an email. She'd touch it absent-mindedly when we talked, her fingers tracing the metal like a secret handshake. Then there was the vase on our mantel, a gaudy thing she'd said was a convention prize. I found a photo of Theo painting it, his hands smeared with clay, her laughing beside him. She'd brought his art into our home, let it sit there mocking me. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but I stitched them shut with rage. I followed them again, this time to a park. They met under an oak tree, her in a sundress I'd bought her, him with a camera slung over his shoulder. She posed for him, twirling, laughing, while he snapped away. Then came the moment that broke something in me. She pulled a picnic basket from her car. Our picnic basket, the one we'd used for years, and spread a blanket. They ate sandwiches, drank wine, fed each other grapes like some Renaissance painting. I watched from a bench, hidden by distance, my hands clenched so tight my nails drew blood. That basket was sacred, a relic of our early days. She'd given it to him without a second thought. Back home, I searched the house for more of their story. In her desk drawer, I found a journal, not hers, but his. She'd kept it, a leather-bound thing filled with sketches and notes. Pages of her eyes, her hands, her silhouette against a window. One entry read, "Clara says she's trapped, but with me she's free. I'll take her away one day." Trapped? With me? I'd given her everything, stability, love, a life she'd seemed to cherish. Now I saw it. She'd been playing a role, and I was the cage she'd dreamed of escaping. The revenge took shape that night. I wouldn't just expose her. I'd dismantle her world, piece by piece, in a way she'd never see coming. I started small, gathering evidence. Screenshots, photos, receipts. I copied Theo's journal, memorized his words. I'd use them against her, turn her freedom into a prison. She thought I was predictable? I'd show her how wrong she was. But first, I needed to know everything. Every lie, every moment she'd spent with him. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was a shadow, a hunter, a man with a purpose. The deeper I dug, the stranger it got. Clara and Theo didn't just meet in secret. They'd built a life parallel to ours, a grotesque mirror of what we'd had. I found a storage unit key in her purse one night while she slept, her breathing soft and oblivious. I drove there at dawn, a squat building on the edge of town, and unlocked Unit 17. Inside was a shrine to their affair. Boxes of photos, a mattress with tangled sheets, a shelf of trinkets, candles, wine bottles, a music box that played a tune I'd once hummed to her. They'd turned a concrete box into their sanctuary, and I'd paid for it, unknowingly, with every late-night work expense she'd claimed. One photo stood out. Clara in a wedding dress. Not ours, but a thrift store find, lace-yellowed with age. Theo wore a mismatched suit, grinning beside her. A mock ceremony, dated 6 months ago, captioned, "Our Day." My chest tightened. We'd renewed our vows that same month, her smiling at me in a church while she'd already played bride for him. I took the photo, slipped it into my pocket, and left the unit as I'd found it. She'd never know I'd been there. Not yet. I started tracking Theo. He lived in a loft downtown, a cluttered space of art and ego. I watched him through binoculars from a parking garage, saw him develop photos in a darkroom, her face emerging in the chemical glow. He wasn't just her lover. He was obsessed, a collector pinning her to his walls like a butterfly. I wondered if she knew how deep his fixation ran, or if she thought she controlled this game. Either way, I'd use it. His devotion would be her undoing. At home, Clara grew bolder. She'd leave the room to take his calls, her voice a low murmur through the walls. Once, I caught her smiling at a text, her thumb brushing the screen like a caress. "Who's that?" I asked, casual as I could manage. "Just a friend," she said, tucking the phone away. A friend. The lie was so flimsy it almost made me laugh. I let it slide, kept my mask in place. She thought she was winning, but I was rewriting the rules. The plan crystallized one rainy afternoon. I'd been staring at that mock wedding photo, the creases worn from my fingers, when it hit me. I'd give her the freedom she craved, but on my terms. I'd let her think she'd escaped, let Theo believe he'd won, then pull the ground from under them. It wouldn't be quick or loud. It'd be slow, meticulous, a revenge that left them hollow. I started with the storage unit, planting tiny cameras I'd bought online. Every time they met there, I'd have it recorded, their sanctuary turned into my evidence vault. The cameras paid off faster than I'd expected. A week later, I watched the first footage on my laptop, hidden in the garage while Clara slept upstairs. There they were, tangled on that mattress, her laughter echoing in the grainy feed. But it wasn't just the act that struck me. It was what she said after, lying in his arms. "Daniel's fading," she murmured, tracing circles on Theo's chest. "He's a ghost in my life now. Soon it'll just be us." Theo kissed her forehead, promised her a future. I paused the video, her words looping in my head. A ghost. She'd erased me while I was still breathing. I kept watching night after night, building a library of their moments. They'd meet there twice a week, sometimes more, oblivious to the lenses tracking them. I saw her give him a key not to the unit but to our house. "For emergencies," she said, giggling. He'd been here then, in my home while I was at work. I checked the footage from a camera I'd hidden in our living room. Sure enough, there he was, lounging on my couch, drinking my beer, her curled beside him like it was their space. The violation burned, but I swallowed it. It was fuel. I started sabotaging her life in small ways, testing the waters. I'd move her phone when she wasn't looking, let her panic before finding it for her. I'd ask about her day with just enough edge to make her squirm, watching her fumble for lies. She didn't suspect me, not yet, but I saw the cracks in her confidence. Theo, though, was my real target. I found his darkroom schedule, learned his habits. One night, I slipped in after he'd left, swapped his developer fluid with a mix that'd ruin his prints. Petty, maybe, but I wanted him to feel the first sting of loss. Clara noticed his frustration. She came home one evening, distracted, muttering about Theo's bad luck. I played the concerned husband, asked if she was okay. "Just tired," she said, avoiding my eyes. I smiled, offered her tea, let her think I was still her safe harbor. But inside, I was sharpening the blade. I'd decided on the centerpiece of my revenge. I'd stage a disappearance, let her believe I'd left her, let Theo move in. Then, when they were settled, I'd return. not as Daniel the ghost, but as Daniel the reckoning. The next step was gathering allies. I confided in my brother, Mark, a lawyer with a knack for bending rules. He didn't judge, just listened, then grinned. "You want to bury them? I've got ideas." We started plotting legal traps, financial knots, a web they'd never untangle. Clara thought she'd trapped me in her lie, but I was spinning one of my own. Soon, she'd see the man she'd underestimated, and it'd be too late to run. The disappearance idea grew roots in my mind, twisting into something sharper with Mark's help. He suggested I vanish in stages, leave breadcrumbs of doubt, make Clara question her grip on me before I slipped away entirely. I started by withdrawing, not emotionally but physically. I'd stay late at work, come home with vague excuses, mirror the distance she'd built with Theo. She noticed, her brows knitting when I dodged her questions. "Everything okay, Daniel?" she'd ask, voice laced with a concern I knew was fake. I'd nod, smile, let her stew in the uncertainty. Meanwhile, I tightened the net around Theo. Mark dug into his life. Tax records, old debts, a misdemeanor he'd buried. Theo wasn't clean. He dodged a few loans, left a trail of angry ex-clients. I used that, posing as a disgruntled customer online. I posted reviews about his shoddy photography, linking blurry images I'd sabotaged from his darkroom. His bookings dropped, his temper flared. I saw it in the storage unit footage, him pacing, ranting to Clara about bad luck. She soothed him, promised they'd figure it out. I smirked at the screen. They wouldn't. At home, I planted seeds of chaos. I'd leave drawers open, misplace her keys, let her think she was losing her mind. One night, I hid the necklace Theo gave her, the camera charm she loved. She tore the house apart, eyes wild, until I found it under the couch. "You're a lifesaver," she said, clutching it. I nodded, imagining the day I'd melt it down in front of her. The storage unit cameras caught her showing it to Theo later, laughing about my cluelessness. "He's so oblivious," she said. The words fueled me, each syllable a brick in the wall I'd crash down on her. Mark and I mapped the legal angle. He drafted papers, divorce filings I wouldn't serve yet, a claim on her business for misuse of funds. She'd been funneling money to Theo. I'd learned small amounts from her shop, disguised as expenses. I had bank statements, receipts, proof she'd tangled our finances with his. Mark grinned as we worked. "She'll think she's free, then bam. Shackled to debt and shame." I didn't want her money. I wanted her pride, her confidence, her illusion of control. This was just the opening act. I tested my disappearance one weekend. Told Clara I was visiting my parents, drove off, then doubled back to watch. Sure enough, Theo showed up an hour later, key in hand, swaggering into my house like he owned it. I filmed it from across the street, him on my porch, her letting him in, their silhouettes in my kitchen. The footage was gold, but I held onto it. Patience was my weapon now. I slept in my truck that night, the cold biting my bones, but I didn't care. Every shiver was a promise to myself. They'd pay. The game shifted when Clara started pushing me. She'd grown restless, her double life straining at the seams. "We need to talk," she said one evening, sitting me down at the table. Her hands fidgeted, the camera necklace glinting under the light. "I feel like we're drifting," she continued, eyes searching mine for a reaction. I almost laughed. Drifting? She'd sailed off with Theo years ago. But I played along, furrowed my brow, asked what she meant. She rambled about needing space, about finding herself. It was a rehearsal, I realized, a script to ease me out. I gave her the space she wanted, or so she thought. I packed a bag, said I'd stay with Mark for a few days to think things over. Her relief was palpable, a quick hug masking the triumph in her eyes. I left, but I didn't go far. I rented a cheap motel nearby, set up my laptop, and watched the storage unit feed. Theo was there within hours, Clara draped over him, celebrating. "He's finally letting go," she said, popping a bottle of wine. "We're so close." Close to what? I wondered. Her freedom? His victory? I'd show them close. Theo's world was crumbling faster now. My online sabotage had spread, clients canceled, galleries dropped him. I escalated it, mailed anonymous letters to his landlord about suspicious activity in the loft, hinted at unpaid rent. Mark found a lien on his equipment, a debt he couldn't settle. I watched him unravel in the footage, snapping at Clara, blaming her for dragging him into this. She argued back, their paradise fraying. I leaned back in the motel chair, sipping stale coffee, savoring the cracks I'd made. At the house, I'd left traps. A fake email from my account, unsent but visible in the draft folder. I know about Theo. I'm done. I'd rigged the computer to crash if she tried to delete it, knowing she'd snoop. She did. I saw her on the living room camera, face pale as she read it, hands shaking. She called Theo, frantic, but he brushed her off, too caught up in his own mess. I'd split them, turned their alliance into a battlefield. She slept alone that night, clutching a pillow, while I planned the next move. Mark suggested the big play. Fake my exit for good. Make her think you've given up, he said. Let her move him in, then hit them with everything. I agreed. I wrote a letter, short, resigned, saying I couldn't fight for us anymore, and left it on the table with my wedding ring. I drove off, circled back, watched her read it. She cried, but not for me, for the plan she thought was working. Theo arrived, smug, carrying a duffel bag. They'd taken the bait. Now the real game began. Living in the shadows was easier than I'd expected. I rented a basement room across town, cash only, no questions asked. From there, I watched them settle into my house. Theo's boots by the door, his camera on my coffee table, Clara cooking him breakfast in my kitchen. The cameras I'd hidden caught it all. Their domestic bliss a grotesque parody of our life. She'd erased me so effortlessly, hung new curtains, rearranged furniture like I'd never existed. But I was still there, a ghost in the wires biding my time. Theo's downfall accelerated. The landlord evicted him from the loft. My letters had worked, and his debts caught up. He had nowhere else to go, so Clara took him in, their freedom now a cramped reality. The storage unit footage showed them arguing more about money, space, the stress of hiding. This isn't what I wanted, she snapped once, shoving him away. He grabbed her wrist, hissed something I couldn't hear. The romance was souring, and I hadn't even dropped the hammer yet. I struck at her business next. Mark filed a quiet claim, alleging she'd misused joint funds. Our savings, tied to the shop. It wasn't enough to shut her down, just enough to freeze her accounts, force an audit. She came home one day, papers in hand, voice shaking as she told Theo. They think I stole from Daniel, she said, pacing. He shrugged, muttered about bad timing. I watched her unravel, her perfect escape tangling into a nightmare. She called me, left voicemails begging me to talk, but I let them pile up unanswered. Silence was my first blade. I leaked the storage unit footage online. Not all of it, just snippets. Blurred faces, muffled voices. Enough to spark rumors in her small florist circle. Clara's got a side piece. People whispered on forums I'd seeded. Her clients dwindled. Friends pulled away. She noticed, grew paranoid, checked her phone constantly. Theo didn't care. His career was already ash, and he'd started drinking more, slumping on my couch like a defeated king. I turned their sanctuary into a cage, and they didn't even know I held the key. One night, I slipped into the house while they slept. Used my old key, moved like a shadow. I left the mock wedding photo on the kitchen counter. A silent message. I see you. Clara found it at dawn. I watched her scream on the camera. Wake Theo, demand answers. He swore he hadn't brought it, accused her of losing her mind. They fought, voices rising, until he stormed out. She sat there, staring at the photo, tears streaking her face. I rewound the feed, played it again, let her fear sink into me like wine. The end was near. The unraveling was beautiful. A slow bleed I'd orchestrated note by note. Clara's shop faltered. Clients gone. Suppliers wary after the audit rumors. She'd call Theo for support. but he'd stopped answering, holed up in my house with cheap liquor and bitterness. I'd cut deeper into him, too, sent his creditors photos of him at my address, proof he wasn't homeless, just hiding. They hounded him, knocked on my door while Clara begged them to leave. The footage showed her sobbing, him yelling, their dream rotting under the weight of my hands. I staged the next act. A package delivered to her shop. Inside, a USB drive with select clips, her and Theo in the storage unit, her voice clear as she mocked me. No note, just the drive. She played it. I'd hacked her shop's security cam to watch, her face crumpling as the audio filled the room. She called Theo, accused him of leaking it, but he denied it, slurring through a hangover. I'd mailed him 1-2 with different clips, her complaining about his neediness. Divide and conquer, Mark's idea, executed with precision. They turned on each other fast. The house cameras caught it all. Theo throwing a glass, Clara screaming about ruined lives, him storming out only to return hours later, begging. She locked him out one night, left him pounding on the door while neighbors peeked through blinds. I tipped them off. Anonymously, of course, about trouble at the address. Gossip spread, her reputation frayed. She tried calling me again, left a message. Daniel, please, I don't know what's happening. I deleted it, let her drown in the unknown. Mark filed the divorce papers, but with a twist. He tied her to Theo legally, joint liability for the shop's debts, based on the funds she'd funneled. She'd signed papers years ago, trusting me with our finances, never reading the fine print. Now it bit her, creditors could chase them both. Theo got served at my house, a process server catching him mid-rant. He tore the papers, but it didn't matter. The trap was set. Their futures knotted together in ruin. I appeared then, briefly like a specter. Drove by the house one evening, let her see me through the window. She ran out, barefoot, yelling my name, but I peeled away. The cameras showed her collapse on the porch, Theo watching from inside, too drunk to care. She thought I'd come back to talk, but it was a tease, a glimpse of the reckoning coming. I'd saved the best for last. A finale so cruel it'd leave them hollowed out, staring at each other in the wreckage I'd made. The endgame began with a letter, not mine, but forged in Theo's handwriting. I'd studied his journal, mimicked the slant of his T's, the flourish of his C's. It was simple. Clara, I can't do this anymore. You've ruined me. I'm leaving. I slipped it into her mailbox, watched her find it the next morning. She read it, sank to the steps, called him over and over. He didn't answer, his phone was off, dead from unpaid bills. She thought he'd abandoned her, and I let her sit in that despair, a taste of what she'd fed me. Theo got his own letter, in her style-curled letters, a florist's flair. You're a leech, Theo. I never loved you. Get out. I left it in the house, tucked under a bottle he'd drained. He found it, roared, trashed the living room, my living room, splintering a chair I'd built. The cameras caught his rage, her return, their collision. She denied writing it. He accused her of games, and they tore into each other, voices raw, trust shredded. I turned their words into weapons, and they wielded them beautifully. I emptied their accounts next. Mark had power of attorney from years back, Clara's oversight, my gain. I drained the shop's funds, moved them offshore, left just enough to trigger overdraft fees. She got the alert mid-fight with Theo, screamed about bankruptcy. He laughed, bitter, said she deserved it. They didn't know it was me, thought it was fate or each other. I donated the money anonymously, charities she'd never find, ensuring she'd never touch it again. Her lifeline snapped, and I held the scissors. The final blow was public. I released the full storage unit footage, not online but to her world. DVDs mailed to her clients, her family, Theo's contacts, unedited, their voices clear. Her mocking me, his obsession laid bare. I watched her mother call, heard the sobs through the cracked window as Clara tried to explain. Theo's sister showed up, slapped him, left him reeling. Their shame went viral in their small circles, a fire I'd lit and walked away from. I returned then, in person, the architect revealed. Stood in my driveway, key in hand, as they stared from the porch, her pale, him broken. You thought I was a ghost, I said, voice steady. Now you're the shadows. I took my house back, changed the locks while they scrambled to leave, bags half-packed, nowhere to go. Mark served the last papers, lawsuits for emotional distress, fraud, enough to bury them in court for years. They'd live, but not whole, not free, not without seeing me in every ruin they faced. Taking the house back was just the beginning. I stood in the doorway, watching Clara and Theo stumble out, their bags spilling clothes onto the lawn. She turned, eyes red, mouth trembling, and said, "Daniel, how could you?" The question was laughable. How could I? I didn't answer, just pointed to the street. Theo muttered something under his breath, dragging his duffel, but he didn't meet my gaze. They left in her car, tires squealing, and I locked the door behind them. The silence inside was mine again, but it wasn't enough. I wanted their ruin to echo. I started with the house itself. Every trace of them had to go. I tore down the curtains she'd hung with Theo, burned them in the backyard, the smoke curling into the dusk. The couch where he'd sprawled, gone, hauled to the dump. The kitchen counter where I'd left the mock wedding photo. I scrubbed it until my hands bled, erasing their fingerprints. Mark helped, silent but steady, piling their leftovers into trash bags. "You're reclaiming it," he said, clapping my shoulder. But it wasn't reclamation, it was exorcism. Clara tried to fight back. She called the next day, voice shrill through the phone. "You can't do this, Daniel. I'll sue you." I let her rant, then hung up. Mark had already warned me. She'd hired a cheap lawyer, some desperate soul willing to take her scraps. But we were ready. The lawsuits we'd filed were ironclad, built on her own paper trail, bank records, emails, the footage. Her lawyer would drown in it, and she'd pay him with money she didn't have. I smiled, imagining her panic as the walls closed in. Theo's collapse was quieter but uglier. I'd sent his creditors more tips, his car's location, his new habits. They repossessed his sedan a week later, left him stranded at a gas station. I drove by, saw him kicking the pavement, bottle in hand. He'd lost his loft, his gear, his name in the art world. The footage I'd leaked had branded him a creep, a homewrecker, and no gallery would touch him. I didn't stop, didn't wave, just watched him shrink in my rearview, a man undone by his own greed. Clara's shop was next. The audit Mark triggered had snowballed, tax evasion whispers, a lien on the property. I didn't stop there. I bought the building through a shell company, raised her rent until she couldn't pay. She defaulted and I evicted her, legal and cold. The day she locked up for the last time, I stood across the street, hidden in a crowd, watching her load vases into her car. She looked older, thinner, the bloom gone from her cheeks. I didn't feel triumph, just a hollow satisfaction, the kind that comes from leveling a field. Their separation was inevitable, but I nudged it along. I'd kept copies of their forged letters, the ones that turned them against each other. I mailed new ones, Clara's to Theo, accusing him of stealing from her, Theo's to Clara, claiming she'd used him. They arrived on the same day, and I watched the fallout through a burner phone I'd tapped into her line. She screamed at him over the call. "You're a liar," he shouted back. "You're poison." They hung up, and I knew it was over. I cracked their foundation, let mistrust do the rest. Clara moved into a dingy apartment, one room with peeling paint. I found it through a PI Mark recommended, discreet, thorough. She'd sold her car to cover legal fees, took a bus to a cashier job at a grocery store. The florist was gone, replaced by a woman scanning cans, her hands trembling when the line grew long. I didn't visit, didn't gloat, just watched from reports, knowing she'd wake every day to a life she'd never planned. Her mother stopped calling, her friends faded. She was alone, and I'd made it so. Theo spiraled harder. He crashed with a cousin, then got kicked out for stealing liquor. I tracked him to a shelter, a gaunt figure in a donated coat. His hands shook too much to hold a camera now. His obsession with Clara reduced to drunken rants. I sent him one last package. A print of that mock wedding photo, her in the dress, him grinning. No note, just the image. The PI said he burned it in an alley, sobbing, the flames licking his fingers. I didn't care if he hurt, just that he remembered. I rebuilt my life piece by piece. New furniture, new paint, a dog named Scout who slept at my feet. The house felt like mine again. The ghosts of Clara and Theo scrubbed away. But I kept tabs on them, a quiet vigil. Mark warned me to let go, but I couldn't. Not yet. Their suffering was my closure, a story I'd written with their own ink. I checked the PI's updates, sip coffee, and nod. They'd lost everything, and I'd taken it, fair and square. Clara reached out once more. A letter slipped under my door. "I'm sorry," it read. Shaky script on cheap paper. I didn't know what I had. I burned it in the fireplace, watched the words curl into ash. Sorry didn't undo her choices, didn't erase the Polaroids, the picnic basket, the necklace. She'd gambled on Theo, on freedom, and lost. I didn't reply. Silence was my answer, sharper than any words I could have sent. The legal hammer fell next. Mark's lawsuits hit court, a double blow. Clara for fraud, Theo as her accomplice. She stood in the docket, hair limp, eyes hollow, while her lawyer fumbled through defenses. The judge didn't buy it. Our evidence was a mountain, her excuses a molehill. She was ordered to pay restitution, a sum she'd never scraped together, tying her to debt for decades. Theo got off lighter, just fines, but with no income, they crushed him too. I sat in the back, unnoticed, watching justice bend to my will. Clara's apartment was raided after a tip mine, through Mark, about stolen goods. They found nothing, but the search trashed her place, left her sleeping on a bare mattress. She called Theo, begged him to help, but he hung up, his voice slurred and distant. I tapped her phone again, heard her cry alone, the sound of bitter music. She'd lost her sanctuary, her pride, her lover, and I'd orchestrated every note. The PI sent photos, her staring out a cracked window, a shadow of the woman I'd married. Theo hit rock bottom soon after. He pawned his last camera, got caught shoplifting to buy a bottle. The arrest was small, but it stuck, probation, a record, another scar on his name. I mailed him a newspaper clipping of the court ruling, circled Clara's name in red. He'd know she'd dragged him down, that her freedom had caged him too. The PI said he stared at it for hours, then threw it in a dumpster. I didn't need to see him break. I knew he was broken. I sold the house. Didn't need it anymore. Didn't want the memories baked into the walls. Moved to a cabin upstate. Scout bounding through the woods. The air clean and sharp. I'd won, not with fists or shouts, but with patience, with precision. Clara and Theo were footnotes now, their lives a tangle of my making. I checked the PI's reports less often, but when I did, I'd smile, her working double shifts, him begging for change. They'd never climb out, and I'd never let them forget why. One night, I found the picnic basket in storage, forgotten in my rush to erase them. I took it to the fire pit, doused it in kerosene, watched it blaze. The flames danced, a final goodbye to the life I'd lost, the trust I'd buried. Scout barked, Ascot licked the embers, and I sat back, the stars above me cold and clear. Their story was over. Mine was just beginning. Clara's desperation grew claws. She tried contacting me through Mark, pleading for a meeting, a chance to explain. Mark laughed when he told me, said she'd offered to sell her story to a tabloid for cash. I told him to block her, let her drown in her own mess. The PI sent a photo, her at a bus stop, coat threadbare, clutching a grocery bag. She'd aged a decade in months. Her beauty withered under the weight of her choices. I framed it, hung it in the cabin's shed, a quiet trophy. Theo's probation officer reached out to Mark, fishing for leniency. Seems Theo had rambled about a setup, blamed Clara, me, anyone but himself. Mark shut it down, cited the court rulings, let the officer know Theo's bed was made. The PI tracked him to a dive bar, slumped over a table, muttering her name like a curse. I sent him a single daisy, her flower, pressed in an envelope, no return address. A reminder, a jab, a ghost of her touch. He'd feel it, even if he didn't know it was me. Their worlds shrank further. Clara's debt collectors called daily, her wages garnished before she could spend them. She'd lost the apartment, moved to a shelter, her pride stripped bare. The PI said she'd asked about me there, whispered my name to strangers, searching for mercy. She wouldn't find it. Theo's cousin took him back, but only as a tenant. Rent he couldn't pay, chores he barely managed. They were tethered to each other's failures, a chain I'd forged, dragging them down together. I heard rumors. Clara tried writing a blog, a sob story about betrayal and loss. Flopped, no one cared. Theo pawned his probation ankle monitor, got caught, faced jail time. I didn't intervene, didn't need to. They were burying themselves now, my hands clean. Mark and I toasted to it one night, whiskey by the cabin fire, Scout snoring at our feet. "You're a sculptor," he said, grinning. "Carved them into nothing." I nodded, the warmth of the drink matching the glow in my chest. The final PI report came on a crisp morning. Clara, begging on a corner. Theo passed out in an alley nearby. They'd crossed paths, hadn't spoken, just stared, two strangers bound by ruin. I printed the photos, pinned them beside Clara's, a gallery of my work. The cabin smelled of pine, the lake outside glinting under the sun. I'd taken everything, her laughter, his smirk, their future, and left them with shadows. It was done. Years later, I saw Clara once, by chance. I'd gone to town for supplies, stopped at a diner. She was there, wiping tables, hair gray, hands cracked from bleach. She didn't see me, didn't know I watched her shuffle between booths, her steps slow, her face a map of regret. I paid my bill, left a tip, just enough to sting, not enough to help. She'd never know it was me, but I'd know she felt the weight of every coin. It was a quiet victory, a whisper of the past. Theo's fate trickled in through Mark. He'd landed in jail, probation violation, petty theft, a string of bad choices. Released after 6 months, he vanished, no trace left. The PI guessed he'd drifted west, a vagrant with a bottle and a grudge. I didn't care where he went, only that he carried the scars, her name on his lips, my shadow in his dreams. He'd never hold a camera again, never frame a muse. I'd taken that too. The cabin became my world. Scout grew old, gray around the muzzle, but loyal. I fished the lake, read by the fire, let the seasons turn. The PI stopped reporting. Nothing left to track, just echoes of lives I'd dismantled. Mark visited, brought news of their obscurity. Clara a ghost in the workforce, Theo a rumor in dive bars. We'd laugh, clink glasses, let the story settle into legend between us. I kept the photos, the footage, the evidence, a private archive in the shed. Sometimes I'd look, not for pain, but for proof. The picnic basket's ashes, the necklace's melted lump, the mock wedding print. They were relics, testaments to my craft. I'd built their fall, brick by brick, and it stood stronger than our marriage ever had. Scout would nudge my hand, pull me back to the present, and I'd let it go, the past a fire long burned out. One spring, I planted daisies by the cabin, a nod to her, a taunt to the wind. They bloomed wild, untamed, a mirror to what she'd chased and lost. I'd sit on the porch, Scout at my side, watching them sway. She'd wanted freedom, Theo had promised it, and I'd given them both a version, raw, cruel, eternal. My life was mine again, carved from their ruin, and it was good.